Hey everyone, it's Kenji, and we're gonna make some carnitas. Clear our screen first. All right. Oh God, this oven. All right, oven door. Good. Oven on. All right, oven set to 275. So carnitas is a Mexican, sort of like Mexican pulled pork. Traditionally, what you would do is you would take pork shoulder. At least this is what they did. When I lived in Spanish Harlem, all the Mexican places that made carnitas there, they would take big chunks of pork shoulder, and then you would slowly cook it in these giant copper kettles in lard, and rendered lard with some flavorings. And then, so you're essentially like, you're doing sort of like the equivalent of like a French confit, where you cook meat sort of in its own fat. And the idea is that it slowly breaks down the meat, similar to braising, but oil actually transmits heat. At a given temperature, oil will actually transmit heat a little bit more slowly than water will. So it's actually a little more gentle than braising, so long as you don't go above that boiling point of water. And the idea is that you cook it, slow cook it until the meat completely falls apart and is sort of tender. And then depending on the style of carnitas you get, it would then continue to be cooked and crisped in that fat, so it would sort of fry in that fat afterwards. Or in some places you would get it and then they would crisp it on a comal, like on a flat top, once you ordered it. Or in certain styles it's not crisped at all. It's kind of chopped up with sometimes with pork fat, pork skin chopped up, and just served kind of soft, tender in a taco. But the style we're going to do today, well, you could do it any way you want, but this method I have, I cut the pork shoulder. So this is pork shoulder, aka Boston butt. You want all the fat and connective tissue and all that stuff in there, because that's all going to kind of melt down and turn into gelatin as it slow cooks. And the idea is that you're going to, rather than using like a ton of oil or lard, we're going to pack the meat into a container, an oven-proof vessel, where it barely just fits in a single layer. So like this, essentially. You can do this in this, you can do this in a baking sheet, anything that's oven-proof, where the amount of pork you have is going to fit in sort of a single layer. All right? So then I'm going to take some salt, season it up nicely. Salt it all over. All right? And pack it down in there. I'm going to go wash my hands. Second. So this method, I call it no waste carnitas, because you don't really have, doing it in a giant vat of pork fat is sort of economical when you have when you're doing it at a restaurant or a taqueria, or if you do this a lot at home, or you have a lot of use for that pork fat. So you make a lot of tortillas that call for pork fat, or you make a lot of refried beans that call for pork fat. Doesn't make so much sense if you cook a lot of different foods and you don't use a ton of pork fat in your own cooking. So this method, you don't need all that pork fat, but you still get a ton of really good porky sort of flavor. Let's see. Can we see what's going on in there? Yeah, I think we can see what's going on. All right. So the other flavors I have, I've got some bay leaves. I'm gonna break them up and just kind of tuck them in there. I've got an onion. Just gonna split it into quarters. Don't even need to peel it really. Actually, I will peel it because I'm gonna use this for salsa later. So a couple quarter onions. And we're also just gonna kind of nestle in here. Okay, just like that. An orange. This is a Valencia orange. You could use like a sour orange. That would be even better if you have them, but I don't. So an orange, I'm gonna squeeze the juice over. This is a pretty sort of classic flavor profile, although carnitas vary a ton. Like some recipes call for Coke or 7-Up in the marinade, but I just like orange juice, onion, bay leaf, garlic, some cinnamon. Just gonna break it up a little bit. Get the cinnamon stick pieces in there. And a few cloves of garlic. In the testing I did, I tried doing a bunch of carnitas a bunch of different ways, both braising in liquid, water-based liquid like stock, something like that, versus braising in fat. And I did find that braising it in fat, because fat is more gentle, because it has a lower specific heat capacity, it doesn't pull out as much liquid from the meat. I think it also has to do with the juices from the meat being held in because the meat gets surrounded with fat. It works better to do that way. So I prefer doing fat over the recipes that call for braising in like a water-based liquid. All right, so we got our garlic, onions, bay leaf, cinnamon stick, orange, and salt, and that's it. And so now I'm just gonna add some, this is just canola oil. So you basically wanna just add just enough that it's coating the top. So it's probably like a 1/4 cup, maybe a 1/2 cup of oil. So not like completely swimming in it, but just enough to sort of fill up all the little cracks so that the meat is covered in oil and everything kind of nestles in there. And then as this cooks, the fat is going to render out and add to that oil. So that's all we do, all right? And now we cover it. If you did this in like a baking dish, you can just cover it tightly in foil. We cover it, we throw it into a 275-degree oven, all right? And then we do nothing. We just let it sit there until it cooks, and that will take about 3 hours or so, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, but I just checked it. Ideally, what you want is the pork to be just tender enough to sort of start shredding, but not so much that it'll excessively dry out or anything. Let me grab a fork. Oh yeah, all right. So you can see the pork rendered all this extra fat, and then let's get a chunk out and put it on our cutting board and see what it looks like. So you want to be able to kind of push it with a fork and see how it sort of holds its shape, but it still completely shreds when you work at it just a little bit. That's a perfect, actually, ooh, God, it's good. All right. Yeah, all right. So now, we're gonna make a couple things to go with this pork. So we wanna let this pork cool. And you could just eat it like this as it is, drain it and eat it soft like this. But what we're gonna do is actually crisp it up. We're gonna do it crispy style. So, let me pull out these chunks of pork. And if you wanted to, if you made this like a day ahead, you can let this cool to room temperature, cover it, let it cool to room temperature, and then throw the whole thing in your fridge, and it'll actually come out a little bit better if you let it cool in its own juices than if you pull it out and let it cool like what I'm doing here, because when you do it like this, you lose a little bit of juice due to evaporative moisture, but its pork shoulder is going to be like super juicy pretty much no matter what, so you don't have to worry too much about that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make a quick salsa verde using some of the juices that came out of the pork. And then we're also going to make some quick pickled red onions, which are a good condiment to have in your fridge. I don't know. I think Ethan Klobowski, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. Klobowski, Ethan Big Lebowski's got a video called like why you need to have pickled red onions, or like the one condiment I put on everything, or something like that about pickled red onions. And frankly, he's right. They're always in my fridge, pretty much always, until my wife finds them, and then they disappear within a day or two. But I have a batch of them going like pretty much at all times, as many restaurants I worked in also had a batch of pickled red onions going pretty much at all times. All right, so we're gonna set this aside. Meanwhile, I'm gonna set my oven to broil. All right, and we're gonna start making our salsa verde. This is based pretty much on the same salsa. I made the salsa verde video a while back. This is another one of those condiments I kind of have very frequently, and if you're gonna know how to make just one single type of salsa, this is the one. Oh, and in the interest of efficiency, actually, let's start getting our pickled red onions going. So I've got a cup of vinegar here. I'm gonna add to that about a cup of water. It's just plain distilled white vinegar. You could use cider vinegar, you could use rice wine vinegar. Doesn't matter too much, it depends on what flavor you like. A couple tablespoons of salt, and also about a cup of sugar. So equal parts sugar, vinegar, and water with a pinch of salt in there. And because I happen to have them in my fridge, I'm going to throw in some thyme sprigs as well. You could use like epazote, you could use nothing, you could use bay leaves, you could use allspice, you could use cloves, whatever tickles your fancy. All right, meanwhile, I'm going to get these tomatillos going. You can make a salsa like this using regular tomatoes also. Roma tomatoes would work really well for something like this. You do it basically the exact same way, where we're gonna broil these to get them nice and charred, and then we're gonna puree them. I love this dish because, I mean, everything together, because it's kind of a streamlined process. You know, like while the pork is cooling down to the point where we can shred it, that's like basically just enough time to make these other elements happen. And then you'll see the onion that we used to braise the pork with, that's gonna go into our salsa, so you don't waste that at all. It adds flavor. Get our tomatillos split in half. Whenever I cut like this, I've been teaching my daughter how to use a knife since she was like 2 years old or so. Whenever I cut like this, where, you know, because normally you do this hand where you make a claw and you rest your knife against your knuckle so you don't cut yourself. Sometimes I do, for certain things, I do this, like bridge the vegetable and then pull the knife through. And whenever I do that, my daughter's like, Papa, you gotta make the claw, which is generally good advice, but there are exceptions, as there are in everything. All right, I got my tomatillos on there. Let's get a jalapeno. You could use a serrano, you could use a Anaheim, you know, like a hatch chili, whatever you want. A few cloves of garlic. Smash, 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 smash. Skins come off. All right, now this is just gonna go straight under the broiler. Meanwhile, I'm gonna take my red onion, split it in half, pull off that outermost layer. I usually...
starts feeling kind of gloomy, and if the skies are looking kind of gray, it won't take long to sing this song and you'll know just what to say. Good morning, won't you come with me?
Doesn't that look great? All right, let me get my knife away. And you know what? I apologize. I realized I didn't know how to pronounce Ethan's last name, and so I kind of just made up, pretended I didn't. Instead of learning how to spell it, I just kind of, instead of learning how to pronounce it, I just kind of made fun of it, which is a thing that I shouldn't have done. So I apologize, Ethan. I will try and learn how to pronounce your last name if you give me a pronunciation guide or call me or something. We'll figure it out, all right, buddy? Nothing but love from me. So we got our tortillas. Let's get our pork here. Carnitas. Oh, man, yeah. Juicy, tender. Got that hint of orange flavor. Some salsa. Some pickled onions. You can, of course, just do, you know, regular chopped white onions, grilled onions, whatever kind of onions you want, or no onions is a perfectly reasonable approach to this as well. Just grab a pinch of, I do like cilantro, so I'm going to grab some here. I like actually bolted cilantro like this, where it gets these little curly leaves. It's, you know, cilantro that's about ready to give it seeds. It's these curly leaves that are extra soapy in flavor. So if you don't like that soapy flavor, don't look for cilantro without those. You see those different, there's these kind of frilly leaves versus the bigger, wider, you know, more traditional looking cilantro leaves. All right. What do we think of this? I think it looks awesome. Tell me what you think, come on. Sit. Oh, all right. Good boy. Oh man, carnitas are the best. Easy and delicious, economical, impressive. Woo, sorry, buddy. It makes people think you did way more work than you actually did, right? That's a good thing. All right, my friends, guys, gals, non-binary pals, I will see you next time. Bye-bye. Don't worry, Shabba, you get some too. Here, sit.